Hello, this will be one of my first tutorials, and it will be focused on how to 3D model a wine glass in Autodesk Maya. It should be a fairly straightforward tutorial, fit for people who are just beginning. I would recommend watching the introductory tutorial that I linked below before watching this, as it gives you a general grasp of where certain tools are located and how to get to them, things that I won't be covering in this video. Um, but other than that, it's a very straightforward process, and it shouldn't be too hard to understand. So the first thing we're going to need here is a reference image. And basically what a reference image is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's an image that you look at to help you understand what you're modeling and to give you reference points so that you can match your 3D model to to the image it's supposed to represent. And in this one, since we're modeling a wine glass, we only need a horizontal view of the glass. So we're going to go into our orthographic views. We can pick any of these except the top. We could technically pick the top, but it would be a little more difficult, a little more annoying. I'm just going to pick the Z view. Basically, how we access our image is we go to View, we go down to Image Plane, and then we import image. And this, as stated, imports an image to the image plane. I'm picking this one, and you can see the glass kind of. The reason I picked the glass was that it was a horizontal view, completely horizontal, and it's relatively flat. It's not too close up. Or you can see that like where the camera is shooting from, it wasn't too close up because the bottom isn't angled down too far. So we know that the points that we're looking at are going to be okay from an orthographic point of view. That is a point of view where no matter the distance away from your camera, the image size stays the same, which is different. And basically this contrasts from reality in that, if I put, say, a car at 5 feet away from me, it's going to look bigger to me than if it were 30 feet away from me, because that's how perspective viewpoints work. But an orthographic viewpoint, that car 30 feet away would look the exact same size as the car 20 feet away from me. And that's what we're going to be doing with this wine glass. Or that's what we want to happen with this reference image. We want it to look orthographic. That is, we want it to look 2D, not 3D. Not exactly the best representation of it, but it's the best I can explain just easily. And at this point, we're going to go to our Move tool, accessible on the left side of the screen, or by pressing W. And we're going to move this up on the Y axis until the bottom of the glass just about equates to the grid line. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to create, well, actually, before we create the sphere, we're going to move this back. The reason for this is that right now, this reference image is not transparent. So it will block our view of the back of our cylinder if we leave it as it is. So we're going to move this back. Make sure that you move this back in the axis that is not shown in your in the orthographic view you're using. Otherwise, it will shift its position, and you want this to stay approximately on or leveled at the origin, just to provide a more accurate reference point for the model you're going to create, just to keep it even. Right, so now we're going to create our cylinder, the cylinder that we're going to make into this glass. It's going to be a polygon. We're not dealing with NURBS or anything like that. This is going to be a basic polygon modeling tutorial. So we create our cylinder. We can either do interactive creation or not. I'm going to do interactive creation. Basically, what interactive creation is you're given control over the placement and size of the object, as well as the orientation if you use your orthographic views when you create that object. Whereas if you don't use that interactive creation, you just click on the object's button and it creates the object for you. At the origin, at a set size. We don't want that right now. There are certain disadvantages to it. For instance, I'm gonna create the cylinder right now. Just pretty obvious. Drag it to determine the base, and then drag up to determine the height. The main issue here is that it's not on the origin, which we want it to be. So we still have our move tool. And to fix this issue, we're going to select our move tool in object mode, of course, and go up to this tool that says snap to grid. I'm going to click that. And we'll know that this is activated because the center of your move tool will change from a square to a circle. And when it's a circle, you know that you're snapping to something, whether it's the grid, whether it's another point. You can say I'm activating multiple of these, and when any of them are activated, it's a circle, and when none of them are activated, it's a square. So we're gonna activate the one that says snap to grid, and then on these two axes, we can either use the square or the two arrows that determine the X and Z axis. We're going to snap this to the origin. And by the way, we already know that the bottom is on the is on 0 on the y-axis because that's a property. When you create it, it starts at 0. In most cases. All right. So now we have our cylinder. On a side note, we can edit this cylinder's attributes in the attribute editor. Pretty straightforward. There are a number of tabs here, different nodes. What we're going to be concentrating on right now is polycylinder. This determines the kind of basic geometrical attributes of your solid. Your radius, your height, how many subdivisions it has on each axis. We're going to leave it at 20. No need for excessive subdivisions here. Caps are your the caps are your kind of the triangles that make up the things that go to the center. Again, these are pretty straightforward. You can kind of get the hang of that. I'm gonna leave it at 20. You can go really as high or as low as you want, but when you get lower, when you eventually smooth this object out, as we will, you'll notice that it looks closer to its actual. It doesn't look like a cylinder. It looks kind of like, if for instance, if you have 3, it looks like a really round, triangular prism. So I would leave it at around 20. For different purposes, you're gonna want to maybe get it lower or higher depending on what you want to do. But for right now, we're gonna leave it at 20. So do not forget to deactivate the snap to grid option right now, because we won't need that probably for the rest of this time. Right, so now we're going to go and we're going to edit our faces. And we're going to extrude them along the general outline of this wine glass. So I'm going to do this by clicking right click and then hitting face, but you should also be able to access this in the modeling toolkit. I'm using Autodesk Maya 2017. So if you're using a version that is either lower or 2018, then it may be a bit different, but you should be able to access it in the modeling toolkit. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You can click. You can either click and just manually select these by by clicking and then pressing shift or holding shift, or the more efficient way, you can go into your orthographic view here. You can drag select the top and the middle of your cylinder, not the bottom, just the top and the middle, and then shift and select the middle again, which will deselect the middle. Now you're left with your top. This is useful, and it's a general habit that you want to develop when you're modeling. It's very annoying to kind of constantly be manually selecting things, and it's a lot easier to do this, especially when you're dealing with higher polygon or objects of higher polygonal counts. So yeah, just do it that way. It's really nice. It's really easy. Another general edge kind of, or another selection trick that people should, generally get used to is the idea of selecting a loop. And a loop, it's a little weird to kind of wrap your head around at first, but in reality, it's exactly what it sounds like. A loop is, it's a group of faces that kind of come together at the end, I guess. There are some weird kind of rules that determine what loops actually are. Like, for instance, if I did this, one would think that this loop would go all the way back around, but it doesn't because there are multiple paths. It's just weird. But basically, for this project, if you want to select a loop, the way to do it is to click one face, and this is for like face, like loops that are made of faces. Click one face, and then shift, and then double click on the next face in the loop, and then you'll get your loop. So for right now, we're just going to use this to match this to the outside of this Wineglass image that we're using. So we'll go to our scale tool, and we'll use these two, the Z and the X axis to scale it out. Make sure to use the square that is between those two axes, because it'll scale them out equally, and you need to make sure that you do that because obviously, a cylinder is kind of equally, it's going to be symmetrical on the axes that we care about, so you need to make sure that it lines up with that. So now at this point, we're going to have to extrude our top faces. We're going to do this a number of times. Extrude is the main tool we're going to be using for this. There are a number of other ways we could make this cylinder, or this glass rather, but we're going to be using the extrude tool because it is the most straightforward way, and it's the easiest for beginners to grasp. So we're going to select the top faces again, using the method we chose earlier, and we're going to press Control E. You can also access the Extrude tool in the Edit Mesh tab. Go to Edit Mesh, and then if you go down, there's the Extrude option. So now we're going to scale these in. You can use the inner cube of the scale tool. This presents an advantage because you can use the central cube in any of the orthographic views, whereas you need the top view to be there to use the cube that will scale it to the axes that you care about, and that can kind of be a bit weird if you're looking at another image while you're scaling it in with, you get what I'm saying. So use the central one and scale these in. Now we can go to our edge selection tool, select the edges we have here, more accurately select the loop of edges we have there. You can do this by double clicking on that edge, or by taking that edge and double clicking on the next edge in the loop. We go to our move tool and bring those down to meet the bottom, or the top of the bottom of our glass. Now we're going to extrude a number of other times, basically using the exact same technique we just used, and we're going to extrude these faces up. Make sure, by the way, that you're not extruding edges, because that will screw up it'll just screw up everything. So just extrude your faces, and your 3D model will be a happy camper. So we're going to extrude these edges up, and we're going to bring them in. We're going to bring these down a little bit. I don't think I quite got the curve right. Alright. We'll do that again. Basically, we're just going to do this as long as it takes to get this shape right. And it's important that we get the shape right, because later we're going to be smoothing this, and a single misstep is going to cause things to just look weird. Now, be advised, we are only, or just kind of understand, we are only, for the time being, modeling the outside of this wine glass. So once we get to the top, we will, we'll make sure that it's hollow. But for right now, but like, so don't be alarmed. We're gonna get to that part. Um, right now, though, we are only taking care of the outside of the glass, and we'll take care of the inner part where the liquid actually is held. Um, once we get our extrusion to the top. So we're nearing the top, and alright, cool. So we're at the top. I like the outside of this. Hope you do too. It looks a bit kind of good, or object mode. We can see it looks very kind of hard and edgy. Like you can see the edges. It's not very smooth. Um, there are some pretty sharp creases there. But we're gonna sort that out. So now we're gonna select the top bit of the top edges, and we're going to move those in, extrude them more accurately, and then move them in. I would recommend that you look at the perspective view for this, and move them in. Like, there's no actual information on how thick the top of this glass is. We can't really see that, so just move it into where you think is right. It won't really matter in the long run, because we're gonna be smoothing this out a lot. Now, make sure, and it's okay if you didn't do this before, because I didn't really talk about it. It wasn't really necessary before. Make sure that on the view with the reference image, you go to shading, and you click X-ray. This is very important, because what we're about to do is we're about to move these faces down. And what we're going to do here is we're going to move them down to make this hollow. We need to see the outside of this cylinder. We also need to see how close the inside of our cylinder is to the outside of our cylinder. Or, sorry, I keep on saying cylinder. How close the inside of our wine glass is to the outside. The inner boundary to the outer boundary, that is. And, you know, the thing that I've seen a lot of people do is they make the wine glass way too thick, because they don't have that, that view turned on. And they can't see how close they are to the edge. And so in the end, their glass kind of looks like one of those weird, medieval goblets, but like a glass version of that. And that's just kind of gross. So let's not do that. Couldn't remember if I extruded that. Turns out I hadn't. Alright, cool. So we're going to extrude this down and basically follow the exact same pattern that we had before. Cool, nice. And you can basically match these up with the edges. There's actually a tool. You could use the snap to edges tool, or snap to points, to actually get these things right on the money. But it's not really a huge deal. It's just a wine glass, and when it's smoothed out, it won't really matter that much. And you're nearing the bottom. So, we now have pretty much the entirety of our, inner and outer portion of our wine glass. But it still looks really kind of sharp and creased, And I don't like that. Except for one part of it. I like this bottom part being creased. This part. I like it being creased because if you look on this wine glass, the bottom of it is creased. So we're going to make sure that this part stays sharp and it's not smoothed along with the rest of the glass. There's another reason for doing this. If we go to our smooth preview by pressing 3, once we have the object selected. Okay, cool. Yeah. You can kind of see that there's something weird going on here. And I'm gonna it's hard to see but basically, especially when it comes to triangles, there's a reason that 3D modeling artists want to keep their designs in quadrilaterals. And I think I've never really gotten a clear answer on why that is, but basically I think part of it is that a lot of the issues that kind of come from that is that they come when you're smoothing it, especially with the kind of central ring of polygons we have here. So when we crease this, we'll just kind of get rid of that. And the way we crease is we go to Shift, right-click, then go down, and select the Crease Tool. And then you drag your middle mouse button to increase the value of the crease. And basically what this will mean is that when you smooth your object, which we're about to, those areas, those edges that are creased, are not affected by the smooth. Now, if you do not have a mouse, or just, I don't know, or just don't want to use the crease tool, there's another way. And we can basically just, and the way we do this is we just add more geometry around that area to kind of artificially crease it. So the way we do this is we go to Mesh Tools, and we choose the Insert Edge Loop tool. We're going to go to our solid kind of hard view to make it easier. So Insert Edge Loop tool, and we're going to add, let's go with 2 edge loops just to be sure. Now, when we press 3, it's creased. Cool. So, now we have our wine glass, but there are still issues that we need to address. The first of which is that the bottom here, that bottom part is, it's a little too smooth. If you look at most wine glasses that exist, their bottoms are not smooth because they're holding liquid and you don't want them to fall off of a table or whatever surface they're standing on. So let's crease those. Go to Edge, select the bottom edge loop, Shift right click, crease, middle mouse button, or the similar option for using the edge loops. All right, cool. So we're basically done here. The top of this, if you want, it's an option. Certainly is an option to select the top 2 edge loops and shift right click and bevel them. The reason for this being that I personally think that when it's smoothed, the top is a little too sharp. It's not really accurate. And so when you bevel it, you can get a much more rounded curve, as we see here. And then in the end, we have this sort of thing. So right now, even when we press 3, and first thing, throughout this process, I wasn't being good about this, but you should save your files because Maya is a cruel mistress, and she will crash intermittently. So save your files, or you will end up being very sad and probably losing a lot of your work at some point. So just get in the habit of doing that. So we now have our full model, and we still haven't smoothed it. We've looked at our smooth preview by pressing 3, but that didn't actually smooth it for us. When we smooth something, we add geometry to it in a pattern that basically fits the smooth preview thing. And you can see the smooth button is under the polygons tab. And if you just press that button, you can choose the number of divisions that you have. This is basically the number of times the smooth thing is iterated, I guess. So if you choose 2 divisions, hold up, yeah, 2 divisions, then that'll mean that your object is it's the equivalent of pressing that button twice. But do we really need to? I would say no. And now we have our wine glass. Sorry. So that concludes the modeling process for this wine glass. We'll be making a tutorial for rendering it separately. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope it got you a little interested, perhaps, in this process. It's certainly a little bit of fun. I would say that one thing to understand about this process is that the strategy for modeling objects differs with what you're trying to do with them. A good example of this is with 3D printing versus game design. When you're trying to make something for a 3D printer, you don't care how many polygons it has. I could smooth this, like 50 times over. Like, I could make it look like this. That isn't 50 times, obviously, but I could smooth it a lot. Because, in the end, I don't care about how difficult it is for a computer to process this. And so there are things that I can do to make that general process easier, to make looking at it easier, to make, and there are other things that I can't use. For instance, I can't, kind of trick the camera into making it look nice for me, even when the actual mesh of it isn't, even when the actual mesh is a little uglier. So I'm incentivized to use more polygons. But when I'm doing it for game design, it's exactly the opposite. I'm incentivized to use low poly counts because I'm going to be using a lot of these sorts of things in game, and I want to make sure that it's easy for the computer to process, and also there are other other texturing tricks that I can use to make it seem smoother than it actually is. I can, smooth the normals down. There are a number of things that I can't do with 3D printing. So, this is just kind of a final note. I'm using this kind of wine glass as an example, I guess, to just kind of show you the idea that this is one method of generating a final product of this wine glass. It is certainly not the only one, and when 3D modeling, we should all consider that, your method for making something like this will change with the purpose of how you're making it. Anyway, on that note, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and goodbye.